From the dream of equal rights for black Americans to the reality, what, if anything, has changed? And dancing in the USA. Move over, Fred Astaire. 30 years ago, Martin Luther King had a dream. He gave a speech before 200,000 people in Washington, D.C. that ranks among the world's most memorable. 5 years later, in April 1968, he was dead, assassinated. Did his dream die with him? Well, there are many who'd maintain that it did, and they can point to recent events in Los Angeles. Would those 4 policemen have beaten motorist Rodney King if he had been a white man? But as in all things, it's not as simple as that, which is why we bring you now this report from Charles Wheeler of the BBC, The Legacy of Martin Luther King.
Airplane to, oh yeah, where the evening walk, oh yeah, oh if you ask them to, oh yeah, I said no, 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 no.
In 1968, Martin Luther King's legions marched northward from the Mississippi Delta. It was the start of the Poor People's March, Dr. King's last campaign. In America's Deep South, he had led and won the fight for the right of blacks to vote and had broken the back of enforced segregation. King now set out to shame America into a full-scale assault on poverty. And to dramatize the new crusade, the poorest of the poor were to set up camp at the seat of government in Washington.
We are coming to demand that the government will address itself to the problem of poverty. We read one day, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But if a man doesn't have a job or an income, he has neither life nor liberty and the possibility for the pursuit of happiness. He merely exists.
It was at the end of Martin Luther King's career that he determined that America not only did not have the will to do what was right, that America did not seek even to be converted to have that will. And that is when Martin Luther King began to redefine his ministry and to redefine his movement. Of course, that is what led to his demise, for then Martin Luther King shifted from saying that the objective and goal was to get a piece of the American pie to saying that the American pie, in fact, is contaminated.
By the time the march reached the capital, King had been assassinated. His most influential allies in the struggle for civil rights were in Atlanta for the funeral. Among them Robert Kennedy, who was to be shot only 2 months later, and Hubert Humphrey, lifelong liberal and vice president. With the death of Martin Luther King, his widow, Coretta, became the leader of the movement. This year, a quarter of a century later, she announced that in August, the poor and deprived would march on Washington again.
We're going back to Washington, not as an idle exercise in nostalgia, but to make a wake-up call to the slumbering conscience of our democracy. We go back to speak for the children of the ghettos and barrios who are languishing in poverty and despair.
But can a strategy that was beginning to fail while King was alive succeed long after his death? King's nonviolent campaign for integration enjoyed substantial white support while he stayed in the South. But in 1965, only 4 days after President Johnson had signed the Civil Rights Act, the biggest urban riot for over 20 years broke out in Watts, Los Angeles. It lasted 6 days and cost 34 lives. And it told Martin Luther King that the Black Revolution was moving at a pace and a ferocity even he could not control. Among hard-pressed inner-city blacks, King was losing ground to more militant leaders, the advocates of black power.
We stand on the eve
of a black revolution, brothers. Masses of our people are in the streets. They're fighting tit for tat, tooth for tooth, an eye for an eye and a life for a life. The rebellions that we see are merely dress rehearsals for the revolution that's to come. We better get ourselves some guns and prepare ourselves.
25 years on, Rap Brown is a convert to Islam. Now, Jamil al-Amin, he is closer to the teachings of King than he used to be. But he warns that violence, even though it's inevitable, always provokes greater violence on the part of authority.
Throughout the history of African Americans in this country, there has always been that kind of rebellion. There has always been violence on the part of the people who have oppressed, and in response to that violence, there has always been those people who will actively fight against it.
In 1991, 4 white Los Angeles policemen are captured on videotape beating a black man with metal batons. Last year, an all-white suburban jury acquitted them of using undue force, and the familiar cycle of violence broke out again. As in Watts and so many of the outbreaks of the 60s, it was the forces of law and order that lit the fuse. This time, Latin Americans joined in, looting and burning alongside the blacks. The riot showed that while the people of the ghetto will put up with poverty, blatant injustice makes them lash out.
You don't push my kids!
For me, reliving America's urban riots after 25 years, it was like being caught in a time warp, discovering again that the victims of these revolts are always the poor.
No gas, no stores, no nothing here. We are living like damn dogs now.
The belief that only by wrecking their own surroundings can society's have-nots make government respond to their plight dies hard in the cities. In 1965, young blacks in Watts told King they had won by making America listen. But it was the black community that had to rebuild Watts, creating jobs at community centers, only to see them destroyed again in 1992.
So what was actually in here?
This opening here was food stamps, and it's still burning. And this is 2 days later. We're here amongst 75% welfare. We're here amongst the homeless. We're here amongst people who have been unemployed for 25 years. A whole community of people who have no connection with the rest of affluent society. This ends up being a clash of the classes. It is the underclass, economic underclass, taking a little bit of what everybody else has in America. And these people do not.
This was Vermont Avenue in South Central Los Angeles in April 1992. A year later, the bulldozers have tidied the wreckage away, leaving acres of wide open spaces, like London after the Blitz. How long will it be before these streets are rebuilt? Like Detroit and Newark, New Jersey, Los Angeles has a black mayor. But it's white America that controls the money. Too little reaches the cities.
The reality of it is, in most of these major cities, by the time the black mayors got hold of the city was already bankrupt. It economically was drained.
If we had been helping small black business to do business, we wouldn't have those kinds of riots. And those riots were not only a failure of the justice system, they were indicative of the failure of the economic system to include blacks in capitalism. And if you don't have access to capital, I don't care how educated you are, and I don't care how much you vote, you're not going to be a full-fledged citizen.
Failing that, blacks must help each other. And in Watts, helping each other is beginning to happen. This is the grand opening of an athletic clothing store and playground financed by local black entrepreneurs. The new owners are members of the city's notorious gangs. Ray Ray of a gang called the Bloods and High T of the rival Crips have arranged a local truce that has reduced the bloodshed in a feud that has plagued Los Angeles for generations. Dropping their handguns, the gangsters have become converts to capitalism.
I have known Ray Ray and High T for the past 6 years. I have worked with them in a training program.
The moving force behind the new enterprise is the dynamic Maxine Waters, member of Congress for Watts. She is as much at ease with her habitually violent young constituents as she is with her fellow politicians in Washington.
I believe in human potential. I believe in human beings and my people.
Gang warfare has cost hundreds, some say thousands of young lives. These are survivors, but only just.
It's the way of life here. There's not too many things you can do when there's no economical base here. There's nobody pumping resources and funds into this community. So that's why you have destruction. You have people eating and living off of each other. We can't say everyone is going to stop stealing, stop carrying a gun, stop using drugs. But the ones that want to stop, hell, let them stop.